Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, first of all, let us say thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because of Allah's blessing, so we are able to join our presentation today. Don't forget, salawat and salam always be delivered to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik alaih, who has brought us from the darkness to this light modern era that we live in today. Okay, before we jump to our presentation, let me introduce myself and my member and the member of this group. My name is Nurhaliza Alfonsi Farahab, and then Irsa Salsabila and Rahmawati. So we are from group 1. We will presentate about conceptualizing the standard of education process. Okay, so the first material will be explained by Irsa Salsabila. So Irsa Salsabila, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. First, we need to know what is standard of educational process. Standard of educational process is as a technical form which is a reference or criterion that is planned or designed in the implementation of learning. Based on government regulation number 19 of 2005, chapter 1, article 1, paragraph 6, the standard of the educational process is the national standard of education, which means the standard of the educational process is applicable to every formal educational institution at a certain level of education wherever the educational institution is located nationally. So, an educational process, both at the national level and at the grade level, will be considered successful in the target competency of graduates can be achieved perfectly. Therefore, several stages and a series of strategies are needed which will later be used as a guidance to achieve these targets. The standard process is a guideline or stage of steps for teachers when they provide learning in the classroom with the hope that the ongoing educational process can be effective, efficient, and innovative. Okay, next, moderator. Next is the function of the standard of educational process. There are some functions of the standard of educational process. First, of course, to achieve the competency standard that must be achieved. And the second is for teacher. For teachers serve as a guide in planning learning programs and as a guide for implementing programs in real activities. Third, for a school principal. For a school principal as a measuring tool for the success of the education program in the school they lead. Next, for supervisor. For supervisor, educational process standards serve as guidelines in determining which parts needs to be refined or improved by teachers in managing the learning process. And the last is for school boards and education boards. For school boards and education boards, develop program and provide assistance, especially those related to the provision of infrastructure needed by school and managing the learning process according to minimum standard. I think it's enough for me. Thank you. I give you back to moderator.
Okay, I would like to say thank you, Elsa, for the explanation. And now we go to the next material that will deliver by myself. Okay, first I will next our presentation. Okay, so as you see in our PPT, there are the materials about the components and the standard of the education process. As you know that standard of education process is very important in education because that is the part of education that make education be more better and have the rules to apply in a school or university. So in standard of the education process, there are some components and built by some components. The components number 1 is a learning plan. Learning plan is the process of selecting, determining, and developing approaches to learning methods and techniques. So the learning plan is about how we, as a teacher, selecting and determining and also developing our learning plan. Because when we want to And third, or when we want to start learning in the class, we must have determining and developing a learning plan, which is also related to our school or where we work in some school or in school or university. Okay, so this learning plan is providing meaningful learning experience and measuring the level of learning process in achieving learning outcomes. So there are outcomes when we want to create a learning plan. There are several functions of lesson plan as stated by Umar Hamalik. So Umar Hamalik said that there are some functions in learning plan on the teaching and learning process. Namely, number one is provide teachers with a broader understanding of the goals of school, education, and their relationship in the learning process to achieve the goals. So this learning plan, of course, have a function to achieve the goals in the process of teaching and learning. And the second, a function to helping teachers clarify their thinking about the contribution of their teaching to the achievement of educational goals. So this learning plan helps us as a teacher to clarify the thinking of the contribution of the teaching. So what is the contribution of us in the teaching or learning process? We made it and we include it in the learning plan. And the third is reducing activities that are trial and error in teaching with a good curricular organization, the right method, and saving time. So this learning plan will make us able to reducing activities that are trial and error in teaching with a good curricular organization. So there are an organization to build this learning plan that the things that we have to remember. Okay, there are also components of a lesson plan. So after we make a learning plan, there are a lesson plan that we have to create in order to make our learning plan can be applied in our classroom. Okay, so the components of the lesson plan is number one is the syllabus. A syllabus is a learning design that contains plans for teaching materials for certain subjects. So this lesson plan, as you know, is very important and matter in a classroom. It is the part of the process that we want to do in a classroom, whether it is the time or the design contents that have a result in selecting, grouping, ordering, and presentation of curriculums. Okay, so after the syllabus, after we have a syllabus, we must be able to create a lesson plan. After that, as I said, that is the part of the lesson plan, but the syllabus lead us to create a lesson plan. Okay, and then after that, lesson plan. Lesson plan is a detail that describes learning procedures and management to achieve one or more basic competencies specified in the content standard and described in the syllabus. So the syllabus lead us as a teacher to make a lesson plan. After we create a learning plan, we know that we must take a syllabus to make a lesson plan. Lesson plan is used to get an activity, to make an activity in our classroom. So there are the components of lesson plan, or in Indonesia, we call it as RPP. That is the school identity, subject identity, class or semester, subject matter, time allocation, competency standards, and learning objectives, basic competencies and indicators of competency assessment, learning material, the content facts, concepts, principles, and procedures of learning. And then after that, learning method, learning media, learning resources, learning steps, assessment of learning outcomes. So when we use the teaching and learning process in the classroom, when we carry that process, there must be an outcomes after we finish teaching and learning process, after we through that. So the lesson plan help us to make competency standards, to know the competency standards, and then another competency, basic competency to make us easy to assess every activity in the classroom. Okay, and then after that, there is an implementation of learning process, or there are some implementation that we will do in using lesson plan and using a the learning process. And number one is implementation requirements for learning process, or learning process implementation requirements. So there are some requirements when we want to implement the learning process in a classroom. First is allocation time. For elementary school, usually takes 35 minutes. For secondary learners, or secondary learners, take time 40 minutes. For high schools or senior high school, take time 45 minutes. And also for the same learning process as senior high school, teacher need to take 45 minutes to have a learning and teaching process in the classroom. Okay, and then after that, there are some requirements also. Lesson textbook, of course. Lesson textbook is very important because you will use it as your guide, that will it will guide you to give material to your students. And then class management, of course, as a teacher, you need to manage your class, whether it is to manage your the share or the table of the students and other part that will related to your learning activities. And next is we have, okay, before this we have a learning implementation. The learning implementation is also important because we have primarily activities which is educate, prepare learning conditions so that students are involved by physiologically and physically, psychologically and physically. So this is very important also. And then core activities. So in the learning implementation, you have core activities, and then after that, closing activities. So there are some 3 parts of learning implementation. First, you have to open your class before you really give the material, and then core activities, and then the closing activities. Core activities, you give the material to your students based on your textbook or based on your materials, based on your goals learning. And then after that, closing activities, which is this is also include some evaluation or assessment inside of it. And then the next is the relation between educational process standard with other standard. Of course, there are some relation between educational process standard with other standards. As you can see in our screen, the relation is the first SPP, or content standard, is related to the competency standard and content standards. Number 2 is the effectiveness and evaluation of the SPP can be influenced or dependent on the teaching staff. And then you can see others. So educational process standard is very important in education because it will decide how you can achieve the goals in the learning process in your classroom. And then because of it, you will know how you can success to teach your students and to give a teaching and learning process in the classroom. Okay, so it is very important for you to know that this is very important to you as a teacher to understand the educational process standard. Okay, so there are some implementation, and also there are some understanding and planning educational program. And then you have to understand the design and implementation of learning strategies. And then after that, the evaluation. The key standard of the educational process standard is number 1, you have to understand planning educational programs, and you have to get a plan. You have to make a plan, and then after that, understand the design and implementation of learning strategies. You must have learning strategies in your classroom, and then after that, you have to understand evaluation of your students, because every person have their own attitude, have their own way of the learning process, and so you have to understand that. Okay, so I think yes, that's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, we go to the next presentation, and
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
that will be explained by Rahmawati. So Rahma, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, Rahma, it's clear.
Hello?
Hello, Rahma, we can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, now I want to explain. Yeah.
Rahma? Rahma, can you hear me? Do you have a problem?
Okay, thank you, moderator. Now I want to explain about the teacher performance in carrying out the learning process is as follows. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, Rahma.
Okay, next slide. Okay, teacher performance in carrying out the learning process. And then there are three performance in carrying out the learning process is a follow. The first one is learning plan preparation activities. In this case, the teacher must prepare a lesson plan to make learning structure according to the learning objective. And then to carrying out the learning objectives process and with the implementation of learning as the implementation of the lesson plan. And then number three, carrying out the learning process is influenced by the spirit of work and the school environment. And then there are the principal's effort to optimize teacher performance in carrying out the learning process. Namely, the first one is providing guidance as an effort by the principal to optimize teacher performance in carrying out the learning process that begins with the preparation of learning plans. And then the second one is carrying out supervision as an effort by the principal to optimize teacher performance in carrying out the learning process ends with the implementation of learning, and then creating a comfortable school climate as an effort by the principal to optimize teacher performance, which is moral and comfortable. Next slide, moderator. Okay. Now there are basic teaching skill for a teacher. below are some of the teaching skills that teacher must process. Namely, the first one is questioning skills. Questioning skills are words or questions that are conveyed by the teacher as a stimulus to bring up answer from student, and then explaining skills, giving an explanation is a very important aspect in the activities of a teacher. And then three, skills using variation. In these skills, the skill of using variation is a skill that uses a variety of teaching abilities, so the learning becomes fun and not boring. And then fourth, skills provide reinforcement. This skill must be processed by a teacher because giving reinforcement is an action against a form of behavior that can encourage and increase in the quality of student behavior. And then there are skills of opening and closing lesson. Opening and closing lesson are basic teaching skills that must be mastered by every teacher in order to achieve a learning objective effectively. And then six, small group and individual teaching skills. In this case, the teacher must have teaching skills for and then last skill is a problem. Okay, I think that's all from me. Thanks to moderator, and I give it back to the moderator.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rahmawati, for the explanation. And then, yes, that is the end of our material. It means we have to close our presentation. So the standard in educational process is very important because it will make a guide for teachers to make a lesson plan and improve teaching and learning skills in a classroom. So as a teacher in the future, we have to understand this. All right, so I think that's all from our group. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are very sorry for the mistake. We hope you can learn something new and enjoy our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Oh yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to give us a questions. Thank you.